Well, good evening. Thank you for having me. Uh, as as Jim has said, I'm hard at work on the Atlanta campaign these days, and I'm here to talk to you about a couple of things. First of all, I'd like to talk to you about this painting. This is a James G. Walker painting of the Battle of Resaca. It represents the Union 20th Corps on May 15th, 1864. It's unusual because it pictures Generals Hooker and General Howard commanding the Union 4th Corps. And also Dan Sickles is in it. I'm sure you're wondering why Dan Sickles managed to get to Resaca, but he was there. He was on an inspection trip mission for President Abraham Lincoln, and Sickles didn't like to miss battles, so he actually volunteered as an aide, so he's there. This painting has a very interesting history. It was commissioned in the 1880s. James Walker did a number of famous military paintings, but then it kind of got lost for about 80 years. It was rolled up and stored in New York City in an armory, in the 7th New York Regiment Armory. And it was mislabeled as a copy of the Gettysburg Cyclorama. It's a really large painting. And over the years, eventually it made its way to the New York State Military Museum. And then one day they unrolled it and said, "This isn't Gettysburg." And they finally figured out that it was literally this lost Walker painting. And I like to use it and bring it out because it has been lost. And it also, because of the Sickles connection and some other, so I think, sort of fascinating aspects. A lot of the guys a lot of the generals that I studied in the East, in the Army of the Potomac in 1862 and 1863, many of them end up here in Atlanta in 1864. And so that's also a connection I find fascinating. A couple of the idea of the missed opportunities came to me because there are a couple of sort of famous incidents considered or talked about in the historiography of the Atlanta campaign. A big one is General James B. McPherson at Snake Creek Gap at Resaca on May 9th, where Sherman, when he first heard about McPherson going through Snake Creek Gap and was about to take Resaca, Sherman exclaimed, "I've got Joe Johnson dead." And then that never happened. McPherson instead retreated, and that's been treated in the historiography, Albert Castell's Decision in the West, some of the other general histories of the Civil War. That's treated as one of the lost opportunities. I'm not going to talk about that tonight because I don't think it is actually much of a lost opportunity. And the other opportunity that you often hear a lot about, if you study or read the Western theater, is the Battle of Cassville, or the non-Battle of Cassville, where Confederate General Joseph Johnson has the Army of Tennessee, and he retreats to this town of Cassville in Georgia, and he's going to try and lure Sherman in. Sherman's going to divide his army, while Johnson divides his army to retreat down two roads, and Sherman's going to divide his army to follow. And then Johnson famously plans this counterattack. That's also not a lost opportunity, really, because overlooked in a lot of the history is the fact that Sherman never took that bait. He didn't follow down two roads. And so all of the energy, all of the historiography that we've spent on Cassville actually turns out not to have been much of a real military opportunity for the Confederates. Instead, I want to talk about a couple of other down key. Yeah, well, that's what I hit. There we go. I am going to talk, however, about Joseph Johnson and James B. McPherson. Joseph Johnson is the man who Robert E. Lee replaced after Johnson was wounded in 1862 at Seven Pines outside of Richmond. And then famously, Johnson never got his command back. When he got better, by then it was Robert E. Lee had won the, fought the 7 Days Campaign, fought Second Manassas, taken the army into Maryland. There was no chance of Johnson getting his command back. And so he gets shuffled around to the Western Theater. He and President Davis have a long-standing feud, really, about strategy and, well, an intermix of personal relationship problems and also severe disagreements on Confederate strategy. Davis, like Lee, favored the aggressive. He wanted offensives. He wanted to carry the war north. Johnson felt that the South lacked the resources for that kind of war and preferred to fight defensively. There's also just a degree of innate caution in Joe Johnson's makeup. The other man is James B. McPherson. McPherson begins the war as a junior officer, as staff officer to Henry Halleck. He serves on Grant's staff at the Battle of Shiloh. Grant and Sherman both take such a like to him that by 1862, he's a brigadier general in charge of a division, and by 1863, he's a major general in charge of a corps. And ultimately, when Grant goes to Virginia to take overall command, and Sherman is promoted to command Grant's Western Theater command of these three armies, McPherson ends up in command of the Army of the Tennessee, Grant's old army, Sherman's old army. He's their favored choice for this command. He's very young. He's, I think, 32. He's almost as shocked as everyone else is in the army. He writes his mother upon the promotion of, when he gets his second star, his promotion to Major General. He says something along the lines of, "I have no idea in the world why I'm a Major General." But he is very much a Grant Sherman protege, and they regard him as one of the most promising young officers in the Army. And so he's going to have a great deal of authority. He's going to command that element of the Army of the Tennessee that takes part in the Atlanta campaign. During this part of the campaign that we're talking about, it numbers about 23,000 men. Johnson's army, when he's finally given command of the Army of Tennessee, the Confederate Army of Tennessee, in Dalton at the very end of 1863, he has an army of about 55,000 men. Ultimately, at the peak of Confederate strength in the Atlanta campaign, his force will be somewhere between 75 and 80,000 men. He will command arguably the largest Confederate army of the war, certainly in 1864 for a time. So both of these men are rising in opportunities. The campaign begins on May 7th, some say earlier, but the Confederate Army is entrenched at a place called Dalton, Georgia, which is about 30 miles outside of Chattanooga. And the federal armies, there are three armies, the Army of the Ohio under Schofield, the Army of the Cumberland under George Thomas, and of course, General McPherson commanding the Army of the Tennessee. After about a week's maneuver, they fight the first large battle of the campaign, which occurs at a place called Resaca, the very place that McPherson was supposed to take on May 9th. He doesn't capture it on May 9th. Resaca is interesting from a military history perspective because it's a very large battle. It involves about 140,000 troops, Union and Confederate. It produces somewhere in the neighborhood of about 9,000 casualties over 2 days. It's not gotten a lot of attention in history. I spent a lot of time in my new book on it. But it also is at the confluence of two rivers. The the Coosawattee and the Coosawattee comes together. It forms the Oostanula River. You don't have to memorize the names, but because it is, you can sort of see the Oostanula there, because it forms sort of a fortified bridgehead between these two rivers. Johnson doesn't have any flanks. He's got a defensive position. And so for 2 days, General Sherman orders attacks on the Union lines, May 14th and May 15th. The point of Sherman's efforts are to try and break one side, break through the Confederate lines, roll up Johnson's defenses. And because he's defending with a river to his back, if Johnson is forced to retreat, he's going to face disaster. But Sherman is unable to make any headway. He's unable to accomplish that mission. And so what really sort of forces ultimately Johnson to retreat, and you'll have to forgive, this is my handwriting, so you'll see my noted artistic talents in action here. But while that battle is raging over May 14th and May 15th, an element of McPherson's army, the Army of the Tennessee, crosses the Oostanula River at a place called Lay's Ferry. And once they get across at Lay's Ferry, Joe Johnson realizes he has to retreat. Because if they cross it at Lay's Ferry and then they go over to the town of Calhoun on the Western and Atlantic Railroad there, that's at the double black lines with the white fill in it. Once they capture Calhoun, Johnson's supply line is cut off. That's virtually the whole point of the Atlanta campaign up to the city of Atlanta is all about this railroad, the Western and Atlantic. That's Johnson's only supply line. If Sherman can capture it or sever it, it forces a crisis. Johnson will have to retreat. And so each time when Sherman elects on a flanking move, and he will do this repeatedly through the campaign, Lay's Ferry represents the second such move. The first was Snake Creek Gap at Resaca. Each time, Johnson will retreat. And this is what really sets up the first opportunity. After 2 days of battle, Joe Johnson, on the night of May 15th, conducts what arguably he's best at, which is a tactical retreat. After dark, after the fighting has subsided on May 15th, Johnson pulls his army out of their trenches, marches them across the railroad bridge and the road bridge and a pontoon bridge across the various rivers, and retreats down to Calhoun. Now, a little bit about Johnson's and Davis's problems with strategy through this entire campaign. Johnson, when he's given command of the Army of Tennessee, Davis wants him to attack. Davis wants him to go on the offensive. He's in Dalton, Georgia. They have lost the state of Tennessee. They have lost Kentucky. Davis wants him to take those states back. He really wants an offensive. Johnson says, I don't have an army strong enough to deal with the federal forces gathered in my front. And moreover, I don't have the logistics, the supplies, the wagons to go into East Tennessee, which is the barren part of the state. The rich agricultural part of the state is Middle and West Tennessee. But to get there, Johnson will have to go through East Tennessee. Says, I don't have the logistics to accomplish this. So you need to reinforce me and also provide me with many more horses and wagons. And Davis says, this is the Confederacy. We don't have men, horses, or wagons. So it's a strategic debate, however, that never gets resolved. The best that the Confederate government in Richmond will do is tell Johnson that we will reinforce you if you agree to take the offensive. And Johnson says, alternatively, well, I can't take the offensive. If you reinforce me, I will retreat, draw Sherman down into a field battle. I'll defeat him after his strength is attenuated by leaving detachments behind to guard his supply line. And then if I defeat Sherman in North Georgia, then maybe I can take the offensive. Again, it's a debate that they're literally still having 2 weeks after the campaign has begun. Johnson has 2 infantry corps and a 3rd corps. The Army of Mississippi under Leonidas Polk is in Alabama and Mississippi in early 1864. Polk takes all his infantry and a cavalry division, in all about 20,000 men, and goes to reinforce Joe Johnson. And as late as May 18th, General Bragg, who's Jefferson Davis's military advisor, is sending Polk telegrams saying, why did you take all these troops to go to Johnson? And Polk says, essentially, because you told me to bring everybody I could bring, and also I think we'd lose the war if I didn't. So, but the whole point is it's a debate that's never resolved within the Confederacy. But hidden in there is Johnson's idea of this strategic counteroffensive, this defensive offensive. He wants to look for places where he can, just as he pretends or says he does at Cassville, he wants to look for places where he can set up his army in position to deal with a portion of Sherman's army. And on May 16th, that's what happens. On May 16th, the Federals wake up. They realize that the Confederates have retreated. One clue is that about 3 o'clock in the morning, the Confederates set fire to a large store of supplies right at Resaca Depot, and that huge blaze illuminates the entire little town of Resaca, and a number of Federals go, something must be up. They can see what's going on. And so Sherman orders a pursuit on May 16th. Now, Sherman has 3 armies and 7 corps. He has about 95,000 men. He has to leave some of those men behind in garrisons. He's already left a brigade at Ringgold, which is his base of operations when the campaign begins. He's left another couple of regiments at Dalton because they've just occupied that. So he's shedding some troops here and there, but he still has about 95,000 men, minus, of course, the casualties that he suffered at Resaca. And so he orders these 7 corps to cross the river. He's going to spread them out, and you see those crossings. If you can read this map, hopefully you can. But a river crossing operation is not easy. They don't have sufficient bridges. One of the problems with Sherman's organization for the 1864 campaign is that he's got 3 armies, but he really only has 1 army that's complete and intact, and that's the Army of the Cumberland. And the Army of the Cumberland has all the logistical preparations. It has the Army pontoon trains. But the Army of the Ohio is a detachment, really only 1 corps, the 23rd Corps. The rest of the corps is in East Tennessee, up around Knoxville. And the Army of the Tennessee is split into halves. Part of it is in Mississippi. Part of it is actually in Louisiana at this moment on the Red River campaign. And so neither the Army of the Tennessee or the Ohio have their own logistical apparatus, and most especially their own pontoon trains. And so everybody has to borrow the Army of the Cumberland's pontoon trains. And Thomas was not ordered to prepare enough pontoon trains for 7 infantry corps, so he doesn't have them. And so when he crosses, McPherson is using those pontoons, and that's what they set up at Lay's Ferry, and McPherson crosses the river, and he has his 2 infantry corps, the 15th and 16th Corps, like I said, about 20,000 strong. And General Thomas will order the 4th Corps under Oliver Otis Howard to lead the way south across the river from Resaca and that's about 20,000 men. But the other corps get hung up trying to cross the river. There's simply not enough crossing sites and not enough bridges. And so the 20th and 23rd Corps, which are sent further east, actually have two rivers to cross and don't get across at all on May 16th. The Union 14th Corps is waiting behind the 4th Corps, and they don't get across. And so only about a third of Sherman's entire army gets across, and they're across in two separate spots, and they're divided by something called Uthkaluga Creek. Now, Joe Johnson has retreated, and when he first looks on the morning of May 16th and says, "I'm going to fight here at Calhoun," he realizes that this creek, Uthkaluga Creek, would separate his line, and it's too deep, too wide. He's uncomfortable having it divide his, flow down the center and divide his army into wings. He doesn't want to be able to cross. And so he elects in the end not to fight at Calhoun. But he doesn't seem to realize that Sherman has the same problem. If anything, that's worse, because the 4th Corps and the 23rd and the Army of the Tennessee are also divided by this creek. And if anything, the creek is deeper and wider because it's closer to its mouth at the Oostenaula River. And so this is not my idea. I first read about this in Thomas Connolly's magnificent study of the Army of Tennessee, his 2 volumes, Army of the Heartland and Autumn of Glory. And Albert Castell, in his 1-volume history of the Atlanta campaign, Decision in the West, also mentions that this is probably Joe Johnson's best opportunity. This is the opportunity that Johnson always said he wanted to, that after the war, he insists that he was waiting for. And yet he's not ready. He doesn't do anything. There are no attacks. They know that these federal corps are coming. They have retreated in the night. They have rested all morning. The Federals have been marching. And so about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, when these 2 corps reach the Confederate positions, Johnson has already decided on another retreat, and he's going to retreat another 10 miles south to Cartersville. And all he does is leave a rear guard. And I think Dr. Castell and Dr. Connolly were absolutely right. This is perhaps the Confederates' best chance in the Atlanta campaign to catch Sherman divided with 2/3 of his army on the other side of a river. He can turn and deal with 2 corps, each of about 20,000 men, one at a time. Johnson's strength has risen to about 65,000 men by this time. So he has a very powerful force. And Sherman doesn't really, doesn't understand, I think, how big a risk he took on May 16th. But that being said, it is a lost opportunity. Nothing happens, just some skirmishing. This gives you a sort of a larger operational map to see exactly where the various corps are. I hope that's clear enough. But and then you see the retreat south, headed the red line that's headed south towards Cartersville. So why wasn't Sherman ready? Sherman had been there since the end of December. He'd been at Dalton. I know from study and from primary source evidence that Sherman, he took multiple trips from Dalton to Atlanta. He went down to inspect the Atlanta defenses. Oh, yes. Johnston, I'm sorry, as pointed out, not Sherman taking, Sherman did take multiple trips to Atlanta, but not right now. Joe Johnson took multiple trips to Atlanta to inspect the defenses there. At one point, they even ordered up some naval guns from the Columbus Depot to fortify Atlanta, which has a lot of people nervous in Atlanta. If he's going to fight and defend if he's going to defend the Confederacy, defend Georgia in North Georgia, why is he interested in fortifying Atlanta? That makes a lot of people nervous in Richmond and in the Confederate state government. Joe Brown, the governor of Georgia, is a little concerned. So, and then also Johnson spends a lot of time. He's out riding every day. He's reconnoitering the area. None of these positions are very far off the railroad, so he could ride down on the railroad, get off the train, do some reconnoitering, looking for these spots. Johnson said he was looking for defensive positions where he could make a stand, and yet he seems oblivious. The whole point about Uthkaluga Creek, his engineers picked out a spot between two hills, and he liked that line on the map. He said it looked good. But when he got there on May 16th, he realized that the line was too long and the creek was too deep and wide, so he didn't like it. Why hadn't he seen that terrain before? I don't know. He doesn't tell us. But I have this sense, save it, we'll get back to it. I have this sense that he's not really thinking about that at the time. I have the sense that that is what he told us was important to him after the war in his memoirs, after he'd been relieved, after all of the fallout of the fall of Atlanta and the subsequent disasters. So what was he thinking about in March, April, May? What was he thinking about on May 16? I don't think he was thinking about taking the offensive at all. I think he was simply too confused by Sherman's maneuvers. And that's for the Confederacy, that's a big problem. For Sherman, that's a great opportunity. And so Sherman kind of gets off scot-free here. None of these infantry corps are mauled. There's no sudden powerful attack that sends 40,000 Confederates against one 20,000 Union column or anything like that. None of that happens. And so that, to me, this exemplifies a lot of the problem with Johnson's command of the army. It certainly is a missed opportunity, and it exemplifies a number of other missed opportunities that go on throughout the campaign.
Did you find that he had any kind of intelligence operation that could feed him information about what was going on at the front?
Confederate intelligence operations are, especially with the Army of Tennessee, are very spotty. The primary cavalry source is Joseph Wheeler. Wheeler is a West Point trained cavalryman who really doesn't like cavalry missions. Wheeler wants to be a raider. He likes battlefield saber charges. He wants to go on deep raids, but the day-to-day work of intelligence gathering, information gathering, reporting doesn't always work well in the Army, in the Confederate Army. This is kind of a closer look at the fight that does develop on May 16, a very limited fight. There's only about 500 casualties produced here. And while that's certainly traumatic to the 500 or so men who were killed, wounded, or missing in the engagement, by Civil War standards, it is not a large battle at all, considering the roughly 20,000 Federals and about the same number of Confederates involved. So Major General William B. Bate. Bate is a division commander in Hardee's Corps. He commands a division of 3 brigades. Most famously, he commands the Kentucky Orphan Brigade, plus a Florida Brigade, and a brigade of Tennessee troops. His division is one of the smaller divisions in the Army. Confederate divisions, by and large, are bigger than Federal infantry divisions. Most Confederate divisions in the Army of Tennessee are 4-brigade divisions, and they're generally 6,000 to 7,000 men. At the start of the Atlanta campaign, the Federal divisions are also about that large. Some are quite large, but that's because they have been merged. And so among some of the Federal brigades, you'll see 10 or 12 regiments in a single brigade, which poses its own problems. We won't get into that tonight. But Bate is colonel in the 2nd Tennessee at Shiloh, nearly lost his leg at Shiloh, rises to brigade command, fights hard at Chickamauga, fights hard on a number of other battlefields. Not hugely popular with his men. They think he's a glory hound. But he's certainly a competent and capable division commander. However, his division, with only 3 brigades, is really only about 3,500 men. It's a small military formation in 1864. He's going to be given, however, a very important mission. After the crossing, after the almost fight at Calhoun, after the retreat to Cartersville, and after the retreat to Cassville on May 19th, Johnson then retreats across the Oostanula, and he goes south to a place called Allatoona, which is a rail station on the Western and Atlantic. Sherman remembers Allatoona from his pre-war days when he was in this part of Georgia as part of he was involved with the Cherokee removal. He comes after the Cherokee removal, but it's part of that campaign. But he remembers Allatoona. It's mountainous, it's rugged. He doesn't want to launch a frontal attack at Allatoona. It's a lot like Dalton, Georgia, which was also mountainous and rugged. So Sherman takes a pause. There's a 3-day pause. Thank God he did, because I can tell you every soldier who could write in both armies took those 3 days to write a bunch of letters home. And I have from virtually every collection of letters that I have, and I've collected a lot of material, they all have a letter dated May 20th, 21, 22. And so they've given us this just a ton of information about what happened in the first few weeks of May. And after that 3-day pause, Sherman is ready. He's resupplied. He's ready to go again. And once again, he's going to cross on a broad front. He's going to send the 14th, there's the 15th and 16th, 4th, 14th. Davis's division of the 14th Corps, I should point out, is in Rome, Georgia. It was sent to Rome to occupy that city. It's connected to the Western Atlantic by a spur rail line, and Sherman wanted to make sure that it was occupied and didn't pose a flank problem to it. So Sherman's going to advance on a broad front, and instead of going towards Allatoona, he's once again going to go for the flank, turn the Confederate right. I'm sorry, the Confederate left, his right. And he's aiming for the counties, the town of Dallas, south and east of Allatoona. And as I mentioned, he's advancing on a broad front. Now, the terrain through here is actually much worse than it looks on maps. As a matter of fact, today you can't emulate the movement of a lot of Sherman's corps, because about the turn of the century, the state of Georgia took about 8,500 acres of this land and turned it into a wildlife management area because no one could farm it. It was mountainous, it was rugged, it was poorly drained. And so while it's not as dramatically mountainous as further north, It's not good terrain to move through. It's heavily wooded. And as a result, Sherman is late. He doesn't get to Dallas. Johnson does get timely information this time, beats him to Dallas. And their first engagement is at a place called New Hope Church. And Sherman thinks he's ahead of Johnson and orders General Hooker to launch an attack at New Hope against Hooker's better judgment. That produces about 1,700 casualties. And then a couple of days later, at a place called Pickett's Mill, Sherman has tried to work his way around one of Johnson's flanks, and he launches an attack at Pickett's Mill that produces about 1,500 Union casualties. It's another fruitless attack. The Federals will in their letters ultimately will come to call this place the hellhole. That's how much they like it. But the Union 15th and 16th Corps, that's the Army of the Tennessee again. That's James B. McPherson. They're on the extreme Union right, and they're way out on the flank. These are the two commanders of the Corps. John Logan, Southern Illinois, Illinois politician, he's a Democrat, not necessarily enamored of Abraham Lincoln, but when the war comes, he's a war Democrat first. And so he will become a famous political and military figure, ultimately a national political and military figure. Grenville Dodge, who you may better know as a railroad builder, but Grenville Dodge commands Logan commands 15th Corps, Grenville Dodge commands the 16th Corps. Dodge is also somewhat famous for being Grant's and then Sherman's sort of intelligence wizard. He's the guy who assesses spy information and collects and analyzes that information and passes it up the chain of command. Together, they reached Dallas on May 27th, about the time that the Battle of New Hope Church goes off. And Sherman has reprimanded James B. McPherson for the Snake Creek Gap Resaca incident. Sherman famously is said to have told McPherson that you had it in your grasp. You had the war won, but you didn't do it. Well, there are a lot of reasons why McPherson didn't go ahead and take Resaca on May 9th, 1864. And I personally think that he made the right choices, primarily because he was under strength. But Sherman thought differently, and at least there's a definite sense that Sherman is unhappy with McPherson and reprimands McPherson a little bit, which I would think would be kind of a goad. Let's back up a minute. Be kind of a goad to McPherson to be more aggressive coming forward in the campaign. But when McPherson gets to Dallas on the afternoon of May 26th, he's confronted only by that one division, William B. Bates' division of 3,400 men. McPherson's force is 20,000 troops. Sherman, after the New Hope Church fight, Sherman orders McPherson on May 27th to attack at dawn. And if we go back a little bit to Dallas, Sherman wants McPherson to attack down there at Dallas. You see that red line at the bottom. That'll turn that flank. Hood and then the flanking columns at Pickett's Mill will turn the other flank. Sherman actually wants to do a double envelopment of Johnson's line along the New Hope, the Dallas New Hope Pickett's Mill line. Well, We know that the Union Fourth Corps at Pickett's Mill ran into a very powerful Confederate force. We know that the Confederates at New Hope Church were well entrenched and numerous. Hooker discovered that. But that's not the case at Dallas. McPherson has 20,000 roughly. Bate has those 3,400 men. And for 3 days running, May 26th, May 27th, May 28th, Sherman will issue orders to McPherson to attack. If you read the orders, they're very aggressive. Attack at all costs, roll up the flank. You attack, we will meet at New Hope Church. I mean, they're not tentative orders. They're not make a probe, feel the enemy. They're very aggressive orders. McPherson literally does not attack on any of those 3 days. As a matter of fact, on May 29th, Bate attacks him because Johnson is unsure whether or not there's a strong Confederate force at Dallas, and so he orders Bate to conduct a reconnaissance in force. And so it's actually, you see Finley's Florida Brigade and Lewis, who commands the Kentucky Brigade. You see those two brigades going forward, and subsequently some elements of Walker that are moved and involved. But it is also, to me, one of the great questions of the campaign. Not just why didn't McPherson attack? He was being very cautious, which is in his nature. I think I can explain why McPherson didn't feel comfortable attacking. But I'm less comfortable with trying to figure out why Sherman didn't say anything to McPherson about his failures to attack along the New Hope line, along at Dallas. Sherman has sort of a troubleshooter, aide de camp, a man named John M. Corse. Corse was a brigade commander, did well at Vicksburg, was badly wounded and was recuperating through the winter of 63, 64 when he comes back to the Army and reports to Sherman in early May, well, actually in April. Sherman says, I don't have a command for you. I'm not going to give you a brigade. Instead, I'm going to put you on my staff. And of course, in a letter home, says something to the order of, Sherman assures me that I will have plenty of opportunity to get shot at. Corse is the man who Sherman sends to Mississippi and ultimately to Louisiana to consult with Nathaniel Banks about the Red River campaign. Sherman was supposed to get the 10,000 troops that were loaned out to Banks back in time for the Atlanta campaign under which one of the Smiths? A.J. Smith, I think. So, but they don't come back. Corse will go to different divisional commanders. There's a Union cavalry commander named Kenner Garrard. He's not performing on May 15th. So Sherman sends Corse to Garrard and sort of kicks him in the butt and says, we got to get across the river on May 16th. They do. Corse is his troubleshooter. And Corse goes to Dodge on May 27th. Corse goes to McPherson on May 27th, and he meets with Dodge and Logan and McPherson in the village of Dallas. And yet that doesn't produce an attack. That doesn't produce the same incentive. So this to me is the other really lost opportunity of that first month of the campaign. Because it's unlikely that Bates' 3,500 men could have stopped two entire Union infantry corps from getting in Johnson's rear and possibly even going as far as Marietta, which is where what Sherman's objective was. It's only about 15 miles from Dallas to Marietta. And yet Sherman doesn't say anything to McPherson, doesn't say anything in his memoirs about Dallas. Sherman doesn't go visit McPherson personally until May 29th, after all this is happened, and after Johnson has realized that Bate has been holding off 2 Union Corps for the better part of 3 days and has reinforced him with other Confederate troops. Benjamin Franklin Cheatham's division, Walker's division, as you see up there. So the map on the right, I threw that in because it's that's an Ed Barse map, and it was prepared in the 1960s. And all those maps are still at Kennesaw Mountain. And if you study the Civil War much, you come across the traces of Ed Barse everywhere. And this map is a detailed brigade movement map for the fighting at Dallas on May 29th, or May 28th, I'm sorry. And I threw it up there just to give you a sense of how detailed it is and really how accurate it is. I know you don't have the frame of reference right now. It's just a map sitting up there in a void. But in my study, Barse was ahead of his time, and we owe him all a great deal. I've relied on these maps a lot, and they really match up with all the information I have. Anyway, I threw that out there. We're going to try and include some of these maps in forthcoming volumes. They really cover their daily situation maps from May 25th through July 3rd through the Kennesaw phase of the Atlanta campaign. They're really remarkable. That's a better look at it. There's John Logan at Dallas. He's riding the lines. This is in the middle of the Confederate attack. William B. Bates' 2 brigades, the Kentuckians and the Floridians, are attacking. And McPherson and Logan think they're under a great deal of pressure. I think that's probably a little bit exaggerated. It's one of the candier Union victories of the campaign. But Logan has a flair for the dramatic, and he's inspirational to his troops. Logan is definitely one of the better corps commanders in the campaign. And here's a Harper's Illustrated image of him riding the lines at Dallas, rallying his troops. So to sum, the 2 most significant opportunities of this campaign to me are definitely Johnson's failure to take advantage of Sherman's problems crossing the Oosta-Noola on May 16th, and then sort of McPherson's mysterious absence, mysterious passivity on May 26, 27, 28. Why does Sherman not do anything about that? Why does he not say anything about that? Was he even aware of the scope of that lost opportunity? I don't know. But I feel Bates should have been aware. Even pushing forward your skirmish lines would tell you where they're opposed and where the trenches are lightly held. If McPherson is due any criticism in the Atlanta campaign, it's not at Resaca, it's right here at Dallas. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, thank you, David. I assume you will entertain questions.
Absolutely. I realize that's a very tactical talk. I hope that doesn't over